Guys, so I had a few questions about my tillering and how I go about doing my tillering. So what I do is I got a little piece of wood right here, and I don't know if you can see this pretty well or not, but I have some little slits cut into here. And basically I have the slits cut in increments of the first slit is right at 9 inches, the next one's at a foot, then it's 15, then it's a 17, 19, and then we finish off at 22 inches. The last little slit is at 22 inches. And so the reason why I do that is because my draw length is really 24 inches. And so basically I just tiller. I keep tillering up until I hit the 22 inch mark. And when my tiller is absolutely perfect at 22 inches, I pretty much just leave it there. I leave it at 22 inches. And basically what that does is it leaves a little bit of wiggle room for any string follow or any set on the bow, or those are pretty much all the terms that I know of, string follow and set on the bow. So let's say this bow takes an inch of set or 2 inches of set or something like that, and I tillered it for 22 inches. With those extra 2 inches, it's going to be perfect at 24 inches. So, and if it doesn't, let's say this bow does not take any set at all, it doesn't have any string follow, then great. We just gain a few extra pounds and nothing's wrong with that. Nobody ever complained about that. So that's the reason why I tiller it at 22 inches. That way I know that at 24 inch draw, which is my draw, it's absolutely perfect. But you can do this accordingly to your draw length. The very common one is 28 inches or something like that, right around there. That's pretty common. But I'm a pretty small guy, so 24 inches is perfect for me. And so basically the way I do my tillering is I'll go through and I'll take my tape measure. And so I got one piece of tape there at 6 inches. And then on my string, I have a little piece of tape right there lined up with that one. And then we go down and we got this one marked at 20 inches. And then we have a little piece of tape right lined up with it. Same thing here, 6 inches on that one, 20 inches on this one. And the tapes here on the string to line up perfectly with them. And really, I just have these here just to show you as an example. When I'm actually tillering, I'll actually take a little pencil and I'll really, I'll find the center of the bow, and then I'll make a mark at every 3 inches. And then the same thing on the string. I'll make a little mark where they all line up, and I'll mark them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. And I'll do the same exact thing to this limb. But we're only doing two reference points here, just for the sake of showing you how I go about doing my tillering. And so basically what I'll do is I'll put the string right at the first slot. And so once we get it there, right at the first slot, we'll go through, we'll tiller it and everything, and then we'll check it. So this one's right at 9 inches. And this one is right at 3 inches. And then we go to this one, it's right at 9 inches. And then we go to this one, and it's right at 3 inches. So great, that's perfect. That lets us know that our tiller is perfectly matched. And so once we get it perfectly matched, that's good. I exercise my limbs. I go like that. I pull on it. I like to pull on it roughly 60 times, and that's what I call a good little exercise. And then I'll go to my next line. And then now I'm at the next line, and I'll check them again. And then now we're at 11 inches on here, and we are at 3.5 there. Sorry about that, guys. It slipped out. But normally I have this is its actual string that's for this bow, but normally I have a string that I use for when I'm tillering, so it slides in here just perfect and everything works out. But basically where I was at was this was at 11 inches and this was at 3.5, and then we'll go through, and this one's at 11 and this one's at 3.5. But this bow is already complete, and it's been, it's already a finished bow, so it's going to be perfectly tillered all the way down to the 22 inches. But let's just say that for some reason, we're in the middle of some tillering. We check this one, and this one's 10 inches, and this one says 3 inches. And then we go to check this one, and for some reason, this one says 9 inches, and here it says 2 inches. So what that's letting us know, it basically lets us know that this side, since this one has 10 inches, and this one has 9, it's letting us know that this limb is bending a little bit more right here. So let's say this one's 10, this one's 9, so we know this one's bending a little bit more. So what we'll do is we'll go to the very opposite one and then scrape a little bit right there. Scrape a little bit, kind of, that'll kind of weaken up this little spot so that it can match this one. And then we'll exercise the limbs a little bit, give it 60 good pulls, and then put it right back on there and check it again. And then, let's say you go through and you check it, and then it's at 10, and then you check this one and it's at 10, and they're both perfect, and you're like, okay, great. So then you move on to the next one, and let's say these are perfect or whatever, then you just move on. But if they're not perfect, then you touch them up a little bit there, touch them up a little bit there. And like I said, when I'm actually tillering a bow, I go in increments of 3 inches, and I'll number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and same thing there. So I'll check line number 1. You know, what is it? And I get it matched up perfectly with this line number 1, and number 2, and number 3, and then we get it perfect, and then we move on down to the next line, and then we get that tiller perfect, and we literally just keep repeating that every slot until we get to our 22-inch mark. And once we get there, at that point, everything should be absolutely aligned and matched. The only exception being is if you decide to leave your top limb longer. Some people like to leave the top limb a tiny bit longer, and that's common. A lot of people like to do that. And if you do that, just be mindful of that. So basically, you know, your take number 1 should be, so let's say we're leaving this limb longer and this limb shorter. We would then expect this one to read 10.5, and then this one would read 10. This one would read 3.5, and this one would read 3. And basically, the bigger limb would have roughly a ½ inch or an inch more of length on each one than this one, since this limb is a little bit longer. And that's how you would go about tillering it there. And so basically, yeah, that's the concept there. I hope that made sense, and I hope that kind of gives you an idea of that a way of tillering, and that's how I go about tillering my bows. During the tillering process, while you're tillering, so let's say that we're on the first line. I like to use one of these scales, and the reason why I like the old school scales, the ones that you can adjust by hand, is because I'll set this on here, and I'll set the bow on here, and basically I'll just kind of hold it, right? And then you can adjust this. So basically I'll zero it out right there with the weight of the wood and the bow. So, and the reason why I do that is because you never want to draw back your bow more than what you intended to pull it back at. So for example, if my desired draw weight is 50 pounds, I never want to go past 50 pounds. So so I have my little slits here in the wood. So basically I would pull this back and then put it on the first slit, and I would check. I would pull it back by hand. You know, I'm going to pull it down, and I'm going to keep an eye on the poundage. So right there, you know, we're still good. And then we tiller, and then we pull again. And as long as we're not going over 50 pounds, then, you know, we'll put it on the next slot, and then we'll tiller it. And basically, before you move down to each slit, you know, if you're starting to pull it down and you notice that the 50-pound mark is between slits, what you do is you take even scrapes off of each limb. So let's say that you took off even scrapes off of this limb, and you took 5 scrapes off this limb and 5 scrapes off this limb, and then you start pulling it down again, and you keep an eye on the poundage, and you're like, okay, I now can successfully pull it to the next slit without going over 50 pounds. Then you leave it there, you check the tiller, you touch it up, and then you just keep moving down. Never go past your desired poundage or draw weight. So if the goal is 50 pounds, never draw it more than 50 pounds. That's something to keep in mind while tillering. Or if it's 35 pounds, don't ever go past 35 pounds. If it's 60, never go past 60. So there you have it, guys. That's kind of a little explanation there of how I go about my tillering process. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions at all or any doubts about anything, don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. And you know, I'm trying to help y'all, just like I've been helped. You know, I've learned a lot from others, and I'm here to try to help you out the best I can.